Episode 1. The Girl Who Whispers to the Walls. They called her Laurel, even though she never said her name. She arrived at St. Agatha's on a rainless Thursday, carrying nothing but a red ribbon and a throat that refused to open. She didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't ask to be held, but the walls listened. The first night, Sister Miriam found her kneeling by the eastern corridor, face tilted toward the corner, lips moving, no sound. Is she praying? One nun asked. Doesn't matter, another whispered. God doesn't hear that far down. But Laurel wasn't praying. She was answering. No one knew who dropped her off. The letter that came with her was unsigned. Just 3 words. She knows silence. They placed her in dormitory C, far into the hall, the bed closest to the boiler room. The other girls avoided her, not because she was strange, but because when she slept, she whispered, not in English, not in Latin, not in any language anyone could place, like wind through broken glass, like secrets exhaled backward. And every morning, her pillow was stained red. At first, they blamed her gums, said she must grind her teeth, that she chewed words in her sleep. But the dentist found nothing, no swelling, no infection, no explanation for why her lips bled every time she tried to speak. Weeks passed, and then Sister Miriam died. Not brutally, not loudly. She was found in the chapel pews, rosary clenched between her teeth, so hard it cracked the enamel, her tongue missing, and carved into the wood of the pew. She finally let me out. They questioned every girl. Laurel didn't answer. Of course she didn't. She never had. But that night, as the nuns whispered prayers, and the candles stuttered low, someone heard her. Not Laurel. Not exactly. Her room was empty, but the boiler room door was ajar, and inside, scratched into the soot-dark wall, I'm still here, but you'll stop hiding soon. The next morning, Laurel stood at the breakfast line, silent as ever, but the girl behind her fainted. She swore she saw Laurel's lips move, and the whisper that touched her ear wasn't hers. It was her father's voice, screaming her name, dead 6 years. They checked Laurel's mouth. No wounds, no blood, but her teeth were different, rearranged, shifted, not in shape, in pattern, forming something that looked like letters, almost like they were spelling. Now, the other girls won't sleep near her. The nuns light more candles, carry salt in their pockets, but the walls, they hum when Laurel walks by, and no one asks her anything, because deep down, they're terrified she might finally answer. Episode 2, The Girl with Someone Else's Voice. 3 days after Sister Miriam's death, Clara spoke. She hadn't uttered a word since her mother left her at St. Agatha's 2 winters ago. But that morning, at exactly 3:33 a.m., she sat up in bed, opened her mouth, and said a name that wasn't hers. I told you she'd open the door. Not whispered, not screamed, spoken in the exact voice of Sister Miriam. Sharp, raspy, with the trembling breath of a woman who had prayed too long in the dark. Clara didn't remember it, but the sound woke 6 girls, and one of them, Sophie, swore she saw Clara's shadow move before her body did. It opened its own mouth first, she said. No one believed her, except Laurel, and she smiled when Sophie said it. Her first smile, thin, crooked, like something inside her skin wanted out. The head nun blamed stress, called it trauma-induced mimicry, but that didn't explain why. The next night, Clara spoke again. This time, she recited an entire hymn, backward, every syllable soaked in static, every note laced with a rhythm too precise to be chance. By dawn, her lips were cracked, her gums bleeding, and someone had scratched a phrase into the floor beside her bed. She's still learning to use what's left. They moved Clara to the infirmary, locked the door, covered the mirror, but mirrors don't care about fabric. They reflect what's been waiting. The nurse found her the next day, standing barefoot on the windowsill, eyes closed, and humming, not just any tune, Sister Miriam's favorite lullaby. When questioned, Clara simply said, She asked me to remember her. Then her nose bled, and she fell unconscious. Meanwhile, Laurel sat on the chapel steps, mouth closed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, as if listening. When one of the younger girls asked her why she wasn't scared, Laurel tilted her head and finally mouthed a single word: borrowed. That night, Sophie heard her mother call her from the hallway. Her mother, dead 7 years. The voice was perfect, tender, coaxing. But when she opened the door, nothing, just Laurel, standing barefoot in the corridor, bleeding slightly at the gums, and smiling. They say a voice is the last thing to leave a dying body. The breath clings to the air, searching for a place to settle. Laurel doesn't speak, but she collects. And now, one by one, the others are starting to say things they've never known, in voices they were never taught. The walls are listening. But worse, they're remembering. And now, they're starting to echo. Episode 3. The words that cut through skin. It began with a bruise. Small, pale, right beneath Annie's collarbone. She hadn't fallen, hadn't been touched. But the mark was there, shaped like a comma, like something unfinished. Annie was one of the quiet ones. But not like Laurel. Annie wanted to speak. She just never had the right words. She kept journals, filled the margins with half sentences. I think I saw, if I ever tell her, I didn't mean to. None of them ended. None of them began properly. She called it emotional stuttering. But now, her body had started finishing them for her. 3 nights after Clara whispered in Sister Miriam's voice, Annie woke to pain. Not sharp, but deep, like something was pushing outward from inside her ribs. She looked in the mirror and saw it, a thin red line, curved just beneath her navel, and beneath it, slowly rising through the skin like steam through frost. Forgive me. She hadn't said it, hadn't written it, but she had thought it 1,000 times, to a sister long gone, to a mother who never answered, and now her skin remembered. She covered it with tape, didn't tell anyone, but the next night, another word surfaced, across her left thigh. Hide. The nurse said it was psychosomatic, stress manifesting in dermatological episodes. But the priest, Father Dolan, he didn't even blink when he saw the markings. He just asked, "Have you been speaking to Laurel?" Annie said no, but she hadn't needed to. Laurel had been sitting 2 bunks away every night, mouth closed, eyes open, listening. That night, Annie tore the pages from her journal, burned them in a tin trash bin near the laundry room. But the smoke curled wrong, sweet, rotten, and in the morning, on the inside of her right arm, write it again. She cried in silence, and when she wiped her tears with her sleeve, the cloth came away stained, with ink, not blood, ink, the same color as her old pen, the one she hadn't used since the last time she wrote the word sorry. The other girls began to notice. She stopped eating, flinched when touched, and when Sophie tried to hold her hand, she screamed, because across her palm, so faint only Sophie could see, "Trust no one who wants to hold you." They moved Annie into isolation, wrapped her arms in gauze, told her she was safe, but the gauze kept unraveling, and underneath, new lines appeared. Not random, not scars, sentences. Some were hers, some weren't. And one night, the doctor walked in to find a single line stretching across her back. Laurel says she's almost ready to speak. Now, they don't let Annie near paper, but she doesn't need it, because her skin writes faster than her hands ever did. And when the lights go out, you can see the words glowing faintly, like prayers, or warnings, or the first lines of a story no one dares to finish. Episode 4, The Mouth Behind the Mirror. The mirror in dormitories, she was old, spotted with age, cracked in one corner, like a quiet apology, but it had never lied, until it smiled back. It started with Ivy. She wasn't close to Laurel, but she was curious, and curiosity at St. Agatha's didn't kill the cat. It listened through its teeth. Ivy had always been the one to watch reflections, She'd stare at the mirror before bed, not for vanity, for something else. If I stop moving, she used to say, sometimes my reflection doesn't stop with me. They laughed at her until they didn't. One night, she saw it. Her body was still, but in the mirror, her lips trembled. She hadn't opened her mouth, hadn't even breathed, but the reflection leaned forward, just slightly, and whispered, she's learning to use us. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, laughed at herself, but the mirror didn't laugh back. Instead, it showed her Laurel, not standing behind her, inside the glass, but not all of Laurel, just her mouth, detached, moving with purpose, saying things Ivy would never repeat. The next morning, Ivy didn't speak, not because she was scared, because her jaw ached, and when she touched her cheeks, she felt bruises forming around the hinge, as if something had used her voice during the night. From the inside, that afternoon, she refused to look in the mirror, covered it with a towel, refused to change clothes in a room. But mirrors don't need your eyes, only your fear. At 3:33 a.m., she awoke to the sound of whispering, not in the room. In the mirror, the towel had fallen, the glass was fogged, and on the surface, a single word had been drawn with a fingertip. Open. She tried to run, but her legs were numb, not paralyzed, held, like something soft and warm had coiled around them beneath the bed, like a voice that no longer needed lungs was holding her still. When the nun found her, Ivy was on her knees in front of the mirror, not moving, not speaking, just mouthing, over and over, she sees, she sees, she sees. They took the mirror away, locked it in the basement, covered it with cloth and salt. But that night, every mirror in the building cracked. Just once. Same angle, same sound, as if something had leaned in too close and smiled too wide. Now, Laura doesn't look at mirrors either. Not because she fears what's behind them, because she knows it's watching. And when she passes by a pane of glass or a still pool of water, her reflection doesn't follow. Her mouth does. Just a mouth, hovering, waiting, and sometimes mouthing Ivy's name. Episode 5. The smell of words that were never spoken. The scent came after her smile. Not before, not during, after. And that was what made it terrifying. Laurel had smiled only 3 times since arriving at St. Agatha's. Once when Ivy fainted, once when Clara whispered in Miriam's voice, and once when no one was looking. But each time, something followed. A smell. At first, it was subtle, unplaceable. Warm linen? Wet ash? Lavender left too long in a drawer? But it clung, not to her, to the room, to the air, to the backs of your teeth, like memories soaked in sugar and vinegar. Sophie was the first to speak of it. She woke gagging. No smoke, no gas, just something. It smelled like an old apology, she whispered, like someone was sorry and never said it, and now it rotted. The nurse dismissed it. Your imagination. The building's old. Maybe the pipes. But that night, 3 girls slept with towels wrapped around their faces, and a girl in bed, 12, wept into her pillow, because the smell reminded her of her brother's breath, right before the car crash. No one told Laurel, but she knew. She always knew. And when she walked into the hallway the next morning, the scent came again, stronger, not in waves, in pulses, like breath, like exhale, like a word waiting in someone's throat too long. They searched her belongings. No perfumes, no food, but the inside of her suitcase smelled like something left behind, something wet, something grieved. Father Dolan requested a private session. He brought holy oil, scripture, incense. But when Laurel sat across from him, barefoot and smiling faintly, the incense went out and the oil boiled in the bottle. He asked her to speak, not demand, a gentle request. Just one word, Laurel, he said. If not for me, then for your soul. She didn't open her mouth, but she did something worse. She exhaled, just once, right toward him, and Father Dolan collapsed, clutching his chest, eyes wide, and as they dragged him away, he kept repeating, "It smells like my mother's last breath, but she died in another country. She never forgave me, and now she has." That night, every candle in St. Agatha's went out at once. No wind, no open windows, just silence, and the smell, sweet, sharp, sad. It filled every room. It dripped from the curtains, soaked the pages of hymnals, and beneath each girl's pillow, a note. No one wrote them, but each one said the same thing. You should have said it when she was still listening. Now Laurel walks freely. No one stops her. No one touches her. Because everyone has something they never said, and they're afraid. She smells it. Episode 6. The hands that never touched anything holy. Her name was Elsie, 9 years old, too young to carry guilt, too soft to hold memory. And yet, her hands told a different story. It began on a Thursday. She reached for her spoon at breakfast and winced, not because it was hot, because it felt familiar, like she'd held it before, except the metal was older, thicker, not the kind served in St. Agatha's dining hall. By noon, the skin on her palms had begun to harden, not swell, not bruise, harden, as if she had worked stone for years. But Elsie had never lifted more than her own blanket. By nightfall, the calluses formed, wide and precise, across the base of the fingers, the pads of both thumbs, and at the center of each palm, a round imprint, smooth and sunken, like something had once been nailed there and removed. She showed the nurse. The nurse gasped, not because of the marks, because her own father had the same ones. Before he died, clutching a bottle and whispering a priest's name he never forgave, Elsie said she hadn't touched anything strange, hadn't touched anyone at all, except 2 nights ago, Laurel held her hand, for less than a second, just in passing. But Laurel had smiled, and after that, the marks began. They tried lotions, holy water, salt compresses. Nothing softened the skin. Instead, the texture grew deeper, like the fingerprints had been rewritten with someone else's hands. That Sunday, Father Dolan attempted a blessing, but the moment he touched her right hand, he staggered back, his own skin now blistered in the same shape, and from behind Elsie's back, a whisper slid across the air. She holds what was never confessed. Elsie stopped speaking after that, not out of fear, out of weight. She said her hands felt full, even when empty, and sometimes when she sat still long enough, she felt movement beneath the skin, like fingers pressing from the inside, like someone trying to grip what she refused to release. That night, she dreamed of church bells, not ringing, clanging, falling from towers, cracking open like skulls, and between the bells, a dozen hands, none of them hers, cupped around her ears. When she woke up, both her hands were clenched into fists, tight, locked. It took 3 nuns to pry them open. Inside, nothing, except a single word, carved shallow into each palm. Left, held. Right, undone. Now Elsie wears gloves. Not for warmth, not for protection. To keep from touching anything she shouldn't. To keep from holding anything she might remember, because her hands don't feel like hers anymore. And when Laurel walks past, they twitch, like they recognize something holy, or something that once tried to be. Episode 7. The silence that crawled into her ears. Her name was Ruth, and she always listened more than she spoke. She was the one who remembered lullabies the other girls forgot. The one who could recite Sister Miriam's rules without blinking. She liked the quiet. But one night, quiet like her back, and it never let go. It started with a ringing, faint, like a fork dropped far away, like someone breathing through a straw across the room. She covered her ears. It didn't help. The sound wasn't around her. It was inside. By the second night, she heard whispers, not words, just breath, like pages turning without hands. And every time she tried to sleep, A soft tickling in her ear made her flinch. Not pain, presence. She told the nurse. They checked for infection, for wax, for damage. Nothing. But that night, she stopped hearing the chapel bells. And the next night, she couldn't hear the wind. She cried at first, not because she was scared, because she missed the sound of her own name. She mouthed it in the mirror, but the silence just watched. By the end of the week, Ruth was deaf. No trauma, no fever, just gone. And the doctor said, she's pretending. But she wasn't. She just heard something else. Because Ruth could still hear Laurel. Not her voice. Laurel never spoke. But her absence, it filled the room like static behind a wall. Like silence that leaned forward and listened harder than God. One night, Ruth woke screaming. Not in sound. In expression. Mouth wide. Hands clawing her ears. Eyes filled with something that didn't belong to a child. They found nothing. But on the pillow beside her, a small gray smear. Something like soot. Something like skin. But shaped like a fingerprint. Now Ruth doesn't react when spoken to. But she flinches when people lie. Like the silence inside her nose. And sometimes her lips move, mimicking what no one said aloud. As if she hears. What should have been spoken. What was swallowed. They say silence is golden. But in Ruth's case, it's feeding. And when Laurel passes by, Ruth turns toward her. Always toward her. Head tilted. Ears open. Like the silence inside her wants to go home. And Laurel is the only place it ever belonged. Episode 8. The dreams that left scratches on the wall. Her name was May. She was the smallest girl in Dormitory C, and the only one who still prayed at night with both eyes closed. She believed in angels, until one crawled into her sleep and whispered with Laurel's mouth. The first dream was soft. She was standing in the hallway, barefoot, watching a version of herself kneel at the chapel. Only the May in the dream didn't move, didn't breathe, but something behind her did. It had no shape, no voice, just the sound of nails dragging slowly across stone. She woke with her throat dry and her hand bleeding, 3 scratches along her wrist, too precise to be from a fall, too fresh to be old. She told herself it was a nightmare, that she clawed herself in sleep. But the next night, she dreamed again. This time, she was in Laurel's room, not watching, standing, and in her dream, Laurel was asleep, smiling, whispering backwards, and May was mouthing something too. Not her words, not her voice, but her truth. When she woke up, the wall beside her bed had changed. Not cracked, not marked, scratched, 3 vertical lines. Then 1 horizontal slashed through them like a tally. By the 4th night, there were 7, and beside the newest set, a word, carved, but not deep, as if done with a finger dipped in silence. Stay. She started staying awake, drinking water, pinching her arms, whispering, Hail Mary, until her lips went numb. But no matter how long she resisted, she always fell asleep, and the dreams always returned. One night, she found herself holding a piece of chalk in the dream, but when she woke, her fingers were stained white, and on the floor, a line of symbols circled her bed. Foreign, looped, like letters from a language that never needed sound to scream. She told the headmistress. They moved her to another dorm, painted over the wall, re-blessed the room. But the next morning, the new wall had scratches too, and this time, the word was different. Again, Laurel never looked at her, never touched her, but every time May passed her in the hallway, she felt her hands ache, her fingertips itch, and at night, her dreams got louder until she stopped remembering them. But the walls didn't. Now, May wears mittens to bed, tied with ribbon, sewn shut, but every morning, the mittens are gone, and the wall beside her, a new mark, a new word, and always written at the height of a whisper. Episode 9. The footsteps that never waited for a body. They came every night at 3:33. Always the same rhythm. Not rushed, Not aimless, deliberate, like someone walking with memory in their heels, and a secret folded into each step. No one ever saw who made them, but everyone heard them, starting at the far end of the east hallway, pacing slowly, uninterrupted, the sound of leather soles on stone. Even though the floor was wooden, even though no shoes were allowed after dark, it was Ivy who noticed first. After the mirror, after the smile, she said the footsteps stopped outside Laurel's room. But Laurel never moved, never rose, never opened her door. And yet, the moment the steps halted, she would smile in her sleep. They blamed the pipes. They blamed rats, wind, settling wood. But deep down, every girl knew the footsteps were choosing. One night, Elsie stayed up. She wanted proof. So she waited in the hallway, blanket around her, ears sharp, and when the footsteps came, she pressed herself flat against the wall. She swears they passed through her, not beside, not around, through, like wind made of memory, like something walking between seconds. And afterward, her hands wouldn't stop shaking, not from cold, from touch. It felt like someone was dragging their fingers across my ribs, she whispered, like they were counting them. By week's end, the girls started tracking the sounds. They drew maps, charted the stops, and realized every night the footsteps stopped outside a different room. And the next day, that girl was changed. Not hurt, not sick, changed, dreamier, quieter, softer around the edges, like something had borrowed her outline and put it back imperfect. One night, the steps skipped Laurel's door. Everyone noticed. And that morning, the girl in bed 3 was gone. Not missing, gone. Mattress unslept. No scent, no indentation on the pillow, but on the wall beside the bed, a faint heel print pressed into the plaster like someone stepped out of her. Now, the girls don't sleep on their backs. They press ears to their pillows, trying not to hear, but the footsteps always come. And Laurel, she always knows where they'll stop, because when they reach the right door, she opens her eyes and mouths one word. Tonight, Episode 10, the voice that never belonged to a throat. The intercom hadn't worked in years. It hung above the cafeteria clock, dusty and cracked, a relic from when St. Agatha's still sang hymns over morning toast. No one noticed it anymore, until one Monday morning at 3:33 a.m., it cleared its throat, not with static, not with a buzz, but with intention, a dry inhale, wet, slow, like lungs remembering how to perform. Then, a voice. "Laurel, are you listening?" Ivy was the only one awake. She dropped her water bottle. The sound didn't echo, because the room was suddenly too thick to hold sound properly. She looked up. The intercom crackled. Then, "She's almost ready. Are you?" The voice didn't sound like anyone from the orphanage. Not a nun, not a teacher, not a girl. It was older, not in age, in weight, like it had been carried too long, by too many mouths that never truly owned it. By morning, no one believed Ivy. Until the next night, 3:33, the voice returned. "May, you scratched your truth in the dark. We read it. It was beautiful." May screamed, not because she heard her name, because the voice used the same tone as her father, who died 10 years ago. Blind, mute, the nuns unplugged the system, cut the wires, tore out the speaker. But the next night, it spoke again, not from the intercom, from the pipes, from the drains, from the radiators, and always at the same time. "Ruth, you swallowed too much silence. But we heard the hunger. Elsie, those hands don't belong to you anymore, but we thank you for carrying them." The voice knew things, private things, internal things, and it never asked. It revealed, softly, lovingly, like confession, like corrosion. And Laurel, she didn't flinch, didn't blink, but one night the voice shifted, and she smiled, and the speaker said, "You can speak now if you like. They're ready. They're listening." They'll believe it came from God. Since then, the girls won't eat in the cafeteria. The room smells like breath. Old, stale, shared, and no one looks at the wall where the speaker used to be, because sometimes, even without wires, the red light turns on and waits like a mouth that never had a throat, only memory. Episode 11, the room that remembered a child who was never there. It began with a desk, dusty, untouched, tucked in the back corner of classroom B. No one sat there. No one ever had, until someone did. May was the first to notice. She was writing in her workbook when her pencil rolled off the table and stopped at the empty desk. Except it wasn't empty. There was a name carved into the wood. Faint, careful, Joanna. No one knew a Joanna. There was no Joanna on the roll call. No photos, no files, no bed assigned. But the name was there. And that night, 5 girls swore they remembered her. Not her face, not her voice. Just the feeling of sitting beside her, like the warmth left behind on a chair, like a laugh that echoes from a memory you can't place. Elsie said Joanna used to braid her hair. Ruth claimed they traded books. Ivy remembered nothing, but cried when she saw the name. And Laurel? She didn't say anything, but when she walked past the desk, the room got colder, not freezing, just still, like something was holding its breath. The headmistress denied everything. No such girl. No missing files. No forgotten transfers. But that night, the board in classroom B was wiped clean, and in chalk, in the top left corner, someone had written, "You forgot me first." May found a notebook under the desk the next morning. Blank pages, except for one, scrawled in the center in childish handwriting. "I was here. I was here. I was here." Written over and over again, until the words became a shape, a spiral, a scream drawn in circles. That week, a bed appeared in the far end of dorm C. No one saw it brought in. No one assigned it, but it had a name tag, Joanna. And some girls began saying they'd always remembered 13 beds, even though there were 12. Even though there had always been 12. Hadn't there? Laurel sat on the 13th bed that night. Just once. Smiled, then got up. But the next day, no one else could sit there. They tried. The mattress stayed soft. Too soft. Like something was already lying in it, watching. By the end of the week, they stopped saying Joanna's name. Not because they didn't believe, because they believed too well. And every time they said it, another detail came back. A drawing, a song, a fight in the lunch line, a scraped knee that never healed. Too real, too present, too wrong. Now, the 13th bed is always made, but no one touches it. And the desk in classroom B, it creaks at night, not because it's old, because it's being used. And every once in a while, someone finds a new page in the notebook. Still the same handwriting, still the same phrase. But now it ends with, "I was here. I am here. I never left." Episode 12. The breath that left frost on the inside of the window. It wasn't cold. The boiler worked fine. No wind. No cracks in the walls. And yet, the windows froze from the inside. It started in dormitory C. One pane. One night, a thin lace of frost etched itself across the glass. Delicate, like handwriting in a forgotten alphabet. The girls thought it was condensation, until the fingerprints appeared. Small, too small, pressed against the inside. And then another, and another, until 10 fingerprints fanned across the lower corner, like a child trying to peek in or out. Ruth woke first, sat up, felt the cold in her lungs. She said it tasted like winter, but not this winter, one she never lived through. By morning, the frost hadn't melted. In fact, it had spread across 3 windows, across 3 rooms, each one with new prints, all too small to be from any of the girls currently living. And one of them had something more, a single word traced in the fog. Let. The next night, the girls covered the windows, blankets, tape, sheets of scripture. Didn't matter. The frost formed beneath the coverings, and one of the panes cracked from pressure, not outward, inward, like something exhaled against it from the wrong side. May touched the glass. Just once. And screamed. She said it felt like a mouth. Wet, breathing, open, and whispering her name like it had known it before she was born. Elsie saw something worse. As she passed the hallway, she caught a reflection in the frosted pane. Only, it wasn't her. It was her size, her posture. But the girl in the glass had no mouth, only a soft white hole where her breath should be. The next morning, the windows in the chapel were iced too, and the altar window bore a message no one claimed. She's still inside. Laurel sat beneath it that morning, reading nothing, saying nothing. But when Ruth passed behind her, she saw it. For a brief second, Laurel's breath hit the air, and it crystallized, just for a heartbeat. And within that crystal mist, a second set of lungs exhaled beside hers. Now, every window in St. Agatha's breathes, every night, and the frost comes not with cold, but with memory, with voices that never warmed the air, but left fingerprints anyway. And every pane holds a new word. Each night, a sentence slowly forming. No one reads it aloud, but everyone knows. When it's done, something will get in, or something will get out. Episode 13. The girl who smiled at the empty bed. They always started full. Each bed, each name tag, each child. But one by one, the beds went quiet. Sheets untouched. Mattresses cold. And the nuns said they were relocated, transferred, adopted, moved to better homes. But no one ever saw goodbye. No suitcase. No hugs. No forms. Only absence. And Laurel? She visited the empty beds. Every time. Not with sadness. Not with fear. But with a smile. It wasn't a cruel smile. Nor a kind. It was a sort of smile you wear when the ending was always going to happen. The kind that doesn't ask why. Only when. May watched her first. After Ivy disappeared. Laurel walked to the vacant mattress, sat at the edge, and placed something on the pillow. No one saw what it was. But the next morning, the pillow was wet, not with tears, not with water, with breath, soft and warm, like someone had just whispered into it from the other side. Then Elsie vanished, and again Laurel visited the bed, smiled, whispered something, tucked the sheet with reverence, as if she were tucking in a child who had finally earned sleep. The girls started counting. Each time Laurel smiled at a bed, someone disappeared the following night. Not always the same pattern, not the same corridor, but always after the smile, like the beds were being chosen, prepared. Ruth couldn't bear it. She tried to stop her, grabbed Laurel by the arm one morning, screaming, "You're the reason they're leaving." But Laurel just looked at her, eyes soft, hands still, and whispered. So faint only Ruth could feel it. They were already gone. I just helped the bed understand it. That night, Ruth dreamed of her own bed, empty, cold, with her body still inside it, breathing, but forgotten. She woke up sobbing, and when she looked up, Laurel was sitting quietly at the foot of her bed, smiling, holding something small. She didn't leave it, didn't speak. She just rose and walked away. But the scent of something final remained. The next morning, Ruth was still there, but her voice wasn't. And for weeks, she didn't speak, only watched the beds, and flinched when Laurel smiled. No one asked where the missing girls go. Not anymore, because there are no bodies, no signs, only space, and the slow, familiar way Laurel tilts her head, like she's listening for the breath that just left the room. Now, when a bed is made too perfectly, when the air feels too still, when Laurel walks by and smiles, everyone holds their breath, because they know what comes next. An empty bed, a quiet name, and a silence that fits too neatly under the sheets. Episode 14, the last rule she broke without ever speaking. There was one place even the bravest girls didn't go, the headmistress's office. It wasn't locked. but it might as well have been. The handle was always cold. The light behind the door never changed, and the air around it whispered, "This is where mercy ends." They said a girl once opened that door. She never came back. Or maybe she did, but with the wrong name, and a mouth that didn't match her teeth. The rule was simple. You do not enter. You do not knock. You do not ask. Laurel didn't ask. She walked in, on a Sunday, while the bells tolled noon, while the girls were kneeling in chapel, trying to remember hymns that no longer fit their voices. Ruth saw her, just for a second, Laurel's hand on the knob, her breath leaving no fog on the glass, her shadow facing the wrong way, and then she vanished inside. No sound, no creak of wood, no gasp of air, just a ripple through the silence, like a rule being bent at the bone. Inside, the room shifted. The books on the shelf turned their spines inward. The crucifix turned upside down, but not from gravity, from recognition. And the grandfather clock stopped ticking, but not at 12, at 3:33, as if time had been waiting for her. The headmistress wasn't there, but the chair was warm, the tea still steaming. And on the desk, the ledger, the one no girl had ever seen, names written in red, dates, behaviors, punishments. But on the last page, there was only one word, Laurel, and beneath it, final entry unspoken. They say the walls began to hum, not with music, with reversal. The Our Father played backward. The light bulbs dimmed, not from fading, but from doubt. And a second heartbeat echoed through the room. Not hers, but remembering her. No one knows how long she stayed. Only that when she walked out, the office door closed by itself, and the knob melted, not from heat, but from decision. She returned to the chapel, kneeled beside Ruth, folded her hands, and for the first time since her arrival, everyone heard her voice, but no one could understand it, because the words didn't go out. They went in, straight into the hearts of the girls kneeling near her, and some wept, some screamed, some laughed, all in silence, because the voice wasn't sound, it was recognition. Since then, no one's entered the office again, because the door is gone, not sealed, erased, like a rule fulfilled, like something finally allowed to end. And above the old frame where the door once was, faintly etched into the plaster, she didn't break the rule. She became the reason for it. Episode 15. The name that wasn't hers, but always fit. The last time Laurel opened her mouth, she didn't speak. She named, not others, not the ones who left, not the nuns who pretended. She named herself, and when she did, the walls bowed. It began with a hum, not from her lips, from the building, from the bricks that remembered too much, from the wood that had absorbed every scream too small to echo. The sound was low, like the earth trying to remember a tune it once forgot, and above it, her breath. She stood in the middle of the chapel, barefoot, unmoving. The girls surrounded her, not in fear, not in awe, in readiness, like they were part of something long rehearsed. In dreams they never knew they had. Laurel didn't ask for silence. It came to her, like a room holding its breath, like the moment before thunder, like the second between loss and understanding. And then she said it, a single word, one name, not Laurel, something older, heavier, a sound that felt like dust and fire, and blood passed through generations of forgetting. The name wasn't beautiful, but it fit her, the way a coffin fits a body, perfectly. Eloan. It hung in the air, soft, final, and every corner of St. Agatha's recognized it. The mirrors didn't shatter. They cleared. The bedsheets unwrinkled themselves. The frost on the windows melted inward, and the 13th bed, the one no one dared to touch, was suddenly warm. In that moment, every girl remembered. They had known her before this place, before the rules, before silence became safer than sound. They remembered a girl who never cried, but held space for everyone else's sorrow. They remembered the one who stayed, so others could leave. The name, now spoken, wasn't just hers. It was a password to every door they kept shut inside. And one by one, the girls began to whisper, not secrets, truths, the kind that had lived inside their bones, but never found air. And with each whisper, the chapel glowed, not with fire, not with light, with release. Eloan stood at the altar and smiled, not the kind that warned, the kind that ends a haunting. That night, the bells rang, for the first time in years, 12 times, then a 13th, then nothing, no footsteps, no frost, no voice behind the speaker, just quiet, not silence, peace. The next morning, her bed was empty, but the girls didn't cry. They placed a ribbon on her pillow, red, simple, tied in the shape of the first letter of her real name, E. No one ever saw her again. But St. Agatha's was never the same. The mirrors stayed clear. The windows opened easily. And the girls? They spoke now. Some loudly, some only at night. But they spoke, because one girl once gave them back the right to. And sometimes, if you stand in the hallway alone, at 3:33, you'll feel it. A breath, not your own. A name you never learned. And a whisper not meant to haunt, but to remind you are allowed to be heard.